Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's Meteorologist Ansley Parker here. And what we're going to do right now is go ahead and talk a little bit more about that potential tropical system that could be heading towards us as we go throughout the upcoming work week here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show you the overview of what's going on, talk a little bit more about what more details we have now that we are in Saturday morning. And I'll go ahead and preface this before we dive into everything by saying, as we go throughout the day today, and especially as we go throughout the day tomorrow, so on Sunday, a lot more details are going to come into focus. So these 2 days are going to be really critical for understanding the path of this system and then also understanding the intensity of it as well. So you may hear a lot more about this just as we go throughout the weekend. I don't want you to be overly alarmed or think that that means that this system is kind of special in some way. It really just means a lot of information is going to come out between Saturday and between Sunday. So that's just to give you some overall perspective, but let's go ahead and talk about what exactly I'm talking about and why this matters for us. The good news is there's a lot of things that are trending towards this really not being a major situation for us here in Central Georgia, but we're going to talk about it nonetheless. So let's go ahead and take this full screen and we will jump into what I'm seeing and then kind of what we can expect over the upcoming week. So this is an overview of what's going on in the Atlantic Basin with the tropics right now. What you're looking at and probably the two areas that you're able to point out for yourself are Hurricane Humberto, which is this area right here. It is a Category 4 storm, so you can see just by looking at it on the infrared satellite that it looks pretty impressive. It's got a defined eye. It's a strong system. So this is a Category 4 storm here. This less impressive looking, but you can tell that it's starting to gather itself. This area here is potential Tropical Cyclone 9, a long convoluted name to really just say this is likely going to become Tropical Depression 9 by the time, potentially even by the 11 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center. In fact, you know what? I should probably check real quick because we just hit the 8 a.m. hour and they will probably do an update here with the 8 a.m. hour as well, just because there are some active watches and warnings out there. Which they may not have done that yet. I'm not seeing any sort of update here just yet. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to read over this really quickly. Okay, so the National Hurricane Center still says this is potential Tropical Cyclone 9 as of 8 a.m., so no changes with that just yet. So let's go ahead and dive into what is the expected track of this system and kind of why this is important to us at all. So this is an overview of both of those systems that we were just talking about. Let's start with Hurricane Humberto because this is going to be an important piece of the puzzle of what ends up happening with potential Tropical Cyclone 9. So remember, it is a Category 4 storm, really strong, and actually expected to be a Cat 5 hurricane maybe sometime tomorrow before dropping back down to Category 4 strength. So this pretty intense strengthening is expected to happen briefly, and then this will be a Category 4 storm. The part that we really care about, because you'll notice this is really not getting anywhere close to the eastern coast of the U.S. Obviously, interests here in Bermuda should pay attention. This potentially could have some strong impacts on Bermuda. But for us here in Central Georgia, and honestly for anywhere in the eastern U.S. coast, the most direct impacts that we're talking about with Humberto is some increased surf, maybe some strong waves. But I want you to pay attention to the curve going on right here, because this section of the storm, as we get into early Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, this part's going to be important because it will impact the steering with what's going on over there. So overall, just kind of show you the path it's going to take. We need to pay attention here in Bermuda, here in the eastern U.S. We're good. It's just this factor that will play into how things develop with potential Tropical Cyclone 9. Okay, so Humberto is covered. Let's talk a little bit more about potential Tropical Cyclone 9, specifically the fact that you can see kind of an ice cream cone looking shape here with the cone. It's a bit of an unusual shape. So let's kind of talk about piece by piece why it's laid out like this. So remember, right now we are just at a low pressure system. This is not technically a tropical depression just yet. It's now got a centralized low pressure, which means within the day or so we'll probably be talking about a tropical depression. By Sunday, we're going to be talking about a tropical storm. So that's why I kind of said this is going to come together pretty quickly. The reason being, once it moves away from Hispaniola, it's away from those gigantic mountain ranges that are over there in Hispaniola, and it's got the chance to better organize over the Bahamas here because the Bahamas are a really flat landmass. The landmass basically just won't get in its way. So we're going to see this go from a tropical depression today to a tropical storm tomorrow. We'll be talking about, and you'll hear the name Imelda thrown around a lot. That is the I name that this storm will take. So this will be Tropical Storm Imelda by tomorrow. Those are kind of the, and I don't want to use the word guarantee because obviously this is still a forecast. There are still things that could change, but these are kind of the things that are basically set in stone as we head throughout the day, today and tomorrow. Also, pretty good agreement about where this thing is heading. When we have a cone that's this tight, that gives us a pretty good indication that there's some pretty high forecast certainty of where this is going to go over the next couple of days. Now that's important because it keeps the eastern coast of Florida outside of this cone. So basically, there's pretty good certainty that Tropical Storm Imelda will blow through the Bahamas here and not have a direct impact on the eastern Florida coast. So good news with that. All right, so that is through the weekend. Then we get to the upcoming work week. That is Monday, likely all the way through Wednesday. So by Monday, notice that is the exact timestamp that we start to take this kind of ice cream coat circle shape here. This is for a number of different reasons. There's a lot of uncertainty as we head into the early part of the work week because of what's going on over here and because of what's going on in our eastern atmosphere here in the continental US. So as we go into the early work week, there is going to be a stall here, and where this system goes starts to become pretty uncertain. So that Monday through, this timestamp is Wednesday, this timestamp is Monday. This Monday through Wednesday time period is where the most uncertainty lies. And I'm going to explain why here as we go throughout the next couple of graphics. So, like I said, the most certainty is what's going to happen here throughout Sunday, and that is really just for the Bahamas. There are tropical storm warnings now in place for the Bahamas. That means that tropical storm force winds are expected as we go throughout the day today and throughout the day tomorrow. But there are no other active tropical storm watches or warnings for the eastern coast of the U.S. That's a good thing because it means that we're not necessarily guaranteed to see tropical storm force winds or conditions as we go throughout the next couple of days. So that's just kind of to show you where the certainty lies with this forecast. Let's talk a little bit more about that Monday to Wednesday time frame by looking at the spaghetti models. And you don't have to be a meteorologist to understand that the certainty with the spaghetti models right here, I would say, is basically non-existent. You can see the direction that all of these different plots are going. There is a wide range of uncertainty here. Now, this red line that you see within spaghetti models, that is usually the computer model trying to get a consensus, an overall median or mean of what these spaghetti plots are thinking and where this is heading. You may not have been, but in case you were paying attention with the forecast over the last couple of days, this red line has sometimes been up the coast of the Carolinas, sometimes thrown its way here into Georgia, sometimes thrown its way towards the north, and now it's kind of taking this path back out towards the Atlantic. So there's just basically a lot of question marks about what's going to happen while it sits off of the eastern U.S. coast, and there's basically no guarantee with what's going to happen with it. Now, I know that is frustrating. If I was curious about what was going to happen with this storm, I was trying to plug in for information, and all I heard was different meteorologists saying how much uncertainty there was. That would be very frustrating to me. So my goal here is to kind of take you behind the forecast a little bit and explain more of what we mean by the uncertainty by talking a little bit more about the pattern that we have going on in our upper level atmosphere. So if you bear with me, I'm going to try to break this down piece by piece here. So starting with the timestamp, I've played this out to that Monday morning time frame when we believe that PTC 9 will be somewhere off of the eastern U.S. coast here. So this is past the Bahamas. I've thrown a low pressure system on here just to not be confusing because we don't have a tropical storm yet. But by this time, it would be a tropical storm off of the eastern U.S. coast. So let's talk about why there is so many different options for what could happen with this storm. And it's really got to do with Humberto. So remember, the track of Humberto, and I may as well just go ahead and draw on this. The track of Humberto kind of takes this curve like this. And the reason being is because in the upper levels of the atmosphere, there is a big high pressure system in the Atlantic Ocean. So that's sitting right over this region here, and it's forcing Humberto to go around it. So this is basically variability number one. How strong is this high pressure system going to be? Meaning how far out is that going to end up pushing Humberto? Remember, as we saw the cone, there was still some variability as to how far towards the west Humberto could move. Now this won't have impacts on the eastern U.S. in terms of this system bringing hurricane force winds or anything like that to this area. It's more to do with how is it going to interact with potential Tropical Cyclone 9. So, okay, that's variability number one. We've got this big high pressure system that could end up moving Humberto a little bit closer to what will be Imelda as we go throughout the next couple of days. Another variability is this low pressure system that we kind of have over our area here. If you think back on the weather that we had yesterday and the weather that we're going to have for the day today, we've had some showers, we've had a couple of thunderstorms. Basically, a big cold front has been sitting over us. It's attached to a dip in the jet stream here. So this low pressure system actually wants to, which may seem counterintuitive because of the way that it seems like the jet stream would push this system out. But what this low pressure system actually wants to do is draw Imelda into basically the Carolinas or the Georgia coast here. So we've got these kind of battling upper level systems going on here. What's trying to happen is Humberto wants to pick up Imelda and drag it out into the Atlantic Ocean like that. But this low pressure system that we have here wants to drag Imelda in towards the coast. So we kind of have these warring upper level patterns, and it's basically a question of which one is going to win. And ultimately what I actually think is going to end up happening is that these systems are kind of going to end in a draw here. And I'm sorry, I'm not the most artistically gifted person. And we're actually going to end up with Imelda kind of being stuck in one place, essentially stalling out where it is. In my professional opinion, that is kind of the most likely scenario that we're sitting at here. So that may have been a bit overly complicated. I hope that kind of gives you some perspective as to why there's so much uncertainty. But that's basically the thinking here with what's going on in the upper levels, why there's kind of this warring pull towards which way this system is going to go, and why I ultimately think that's going to end up with this system sitting in one place and stalling. So with all of that complicated upper level pattern, let's just go ahead and go back to the basics and take a look at what this looks like on the future view. So this is the graph model. You're very familiar with the graph model. That's the one that we use most often to talk about high resolution forecast for our area. So what the graph model really highlights here is kind of exactly what I was just saying. So as we go throughout the weekend and then we kick off the work week, this system is still all the way down here in the Bahamas. It starts to move really, really slowly. And then as we play this all the way into early Tuesday morning, take a look at how little that thing moves. And I really think that that's got to do with what's going on here with Humberto and the fact that it's trying to be drawn inland, but neither system here can really win. So that's kind of why stalling is starting to look like a more likely scenario here. And I think that the graph model kind of echoes that as well. Now the graph model only goes out to early Tuesday morning. So I'm going to show you the long range models as well. And you'll notice a pretty similar setup with the long range models also. So take a note of the time. We're still at Monday kind of evening at this point, and it's still sitting over here off the coast. You're going to see a little bit of a different scenario play out with the long range models as of this morning. But by Tuesday afternoon, this thing is still sitting off the coast, not really moved very much. Now, of course, it's pushed some rain bands out towards the coastal Carolinas, out towards coastal Georgia, but it's not had a major directly landfalling impact on any of these regions. It's kind of stuck here, which will have impacts in and of itself. We'll be talking about rainfall totals here in just a minute, but obviously that's a lot better than having a major inland landfalling hurricane impact. So the difference here, as we play this out, is that this morning these long-range models have gone with the trend that Humberto will pick this up and carry it out back into the Atlantic. So that's the scenario that you see there. Honestly, this would be great. This would kind of be best case scenario because it would stall out for about Monday and Tuesday. Obviously, that would have some impacts in terms of rainfall totals, but then it would get out of here and kind of leave us alone as we go into the rest of the week. Those are kind of the only model scenarios that we have at the moment to kind of play out. I'll just go back to the spaghetti models really quickly just to kind of wrap all of that in a pretty bow. It's a reflection of kind of all the possibilities that you see here. I think if I had to kind of make my own mean here, all of these, where these are all converging right off the coast here, and you can kind of see the highest concentration of the white spaghetti models overlapping each other. I think there's starting to be a pretty good consensus that, yeah, we'll stall out somewhere in this area. And then my hope is that a lot of these models that are trending towards this moving away are starting to look correct. But there is still a world in which this could hang out even longer, and that obviously would cause some issues for the coastal Carolinas, maybe the Georgia coast as well in terms of rainfall totals. But we don't live on the Georgia coast. We don't live in the coastal Carolinas. We live here in central Georgia. So what in the world do you need to understand about what this is going to mean for our area? The first and foremost thing that I want you to note is that basically the impacts here in central Georgia are looking to be extremely minimal. In fact, in the worst case scenario that I'm tracking, so in kind of one of those models where maybe this would try to make an inland push, the worst case scenario we're talking about would be some increased showers and then maybe some breezy conditions. I'm not even necessarily talking about hurricane force winds or tropical storm force winds. We just might have a pretty noticeable breeze through the next week. But actually, in the way this is trending, I think we're going to stay on the western side of this thing, which in turn may end up filtering some cooler and drier air into our area. So actually, the way that I see it right now, this ends up kind of pushing a fall-like feel into our area as opposed to even having kind of rounds of rain. I'll show you what I'm talking about with the wind gusts here. As we go through the weekend, things will be pretty normal. And then as we start heading towards Monday, and this system tries to make its way a little bit closer to our area, as it's rotating counterclockwise, for us, being on the western side, that means it's going to start drawing in all of this flow coming in from the north and the northeast as opposed to from the south and the southwest. So what that's actually going to end up doing is giving us a pretty strong breeze. You can see the wind gusts by Monday morning are up to about 20 miles per hour. That's going to bring us a strong breeze, but also if you're kind of familiar with this setup, this is when we tend to have cooler and drier air being filtered into our area as well because it's coming down from the north, so it's a cooler air mass. And that actually may reflect as we go throughout the rest of the week in our temperatures and in just the way things feel outside also. So again, I'm kind of showing you, in my personal opinion, the way that I think this is heading. Obviously, there's still a lot of question marks, and they will get answered as we go throughout the day today and as we go throughout the day Sunday. But to me, this is the most likely scenario for us here in central Georgia. And I don't think there's a lot of variability in our central Georgia forecast, if that gives you some sort of peace of mind as we go through the weekend here with this. So that's what I mean by winds, and that's kind of what I'm thinking with that. Let's take a look at the future view. Now, there will be different weather that won't be driven by this system as we go through the weekend, but as we head into the early work week, we may have a couple of scattered showers from the tropical moisture that will be kind of pushing into our area. But again, you're not necessarily seeing those rounds of rain bands wrap their way into our area. It's really just a couple of scattered showers, and then we have that reinforcement of drier and cooler air coming down from the northeast. So overall, I've only thrown about a 20% chance of rain for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday on the 7-day forecast because I actually think that this could have the opposite effect in the sense that it may dry us out as opposed to bringing us rain bands. Obviously, that's not the scenario for everybody. If we kind of take a look at the rainfall totals, I believe this goes through next week, so this is pretty long. And what you see here for having, you know, 1/10 of an inch here in Macon and down there in Albany, that actually may be a result of the rain chances that we have for the weekend. So don't get too hung up on that. But you can see what actually is from the system itself. The concentration seems to be further towards the north over in the coastal Carolinas, on the South Carolina and North Carolina coast, and the Georgia coast as well. What we have here looks to be pretty minimal. In fact, in terms of total numbers, we probably are talking about less than 1/2 an inch, even in the heavier spots in our area. I think the rain chances will be best for our eastern counties just because of the nature of this thing. Closer towards the coast, maybe have a little bit better coverage of rain, but overall, I still think even the heaviest amounts won't be very impressive in our area. We'll do the same thing on a different model just to kind of keep the options open. And it's pretty much a similar story in the sense that for us, not really talking about a lot of rain, but over in South and North Carolina, and then of course the Georgia coast, that's where the concentration of the rain is looking to be a little bit higher. So that is kind of all of the graphics that I had prepared to kind of explain that. I know we are live on Facebook right now, so let me go ahead and turn to Facebook and see if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment. But from what I'm seeing right now, I don't see any questions. Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions, but feel free to leave one now that I've turned to the Facebook chat. But I think overall, if you were asking me my opinion as a meteorologist, there have been times that I've been concerned about tropical systems as they kind of progress and we figure out a little bit more about their track. Obviously, you know, this is a way different scenario than the hurricane season that we had last year. Overall, am I overly concerned about this, especially for our area? No, not really. I think even as a system itself, even for the coastal Carolinas, in fact, the major impact that we'll be watching for is going to be heavy rainfall totals. We want to pay attention. You can see on even just the GFS model here, I mean, over 4 inches of rain is going to be a pretty substantial amount, and how long this system tries to sit in the same region will have an impact on areas where the rainfall totals really start to rack up. But in terms of what you typically think with a tropical system, the really, really strong winds, just how violent some of these storms can be as they make direct land impacts, that's not necessarily the thing that I'm paying attention to with this storm. It's really more the rainfall totals, because I don't think at this time it's trending towards a major direct inland impact. And even that, in some of the highest models thinking, the strongest that we're really looking at this storm to be is at most right now a Category 1 hurricane. So we're not even talking about a major hurricane, and more likely once this thing comes into contact with land, it'll probably drop down to a tropical storm pretty quickly. So I'm gonna throw this kind of explainer for our area back up on here, just so if you missed what I was talking about for Central Georgia, you have that kind of as a takeaway. But overall, I think you should just be encouraged, cautious, paying attention for changes as we go throughout the weekend. But I think even in the worst case scenario here, things are trending in a pretty positive direction. Obviously, this is a tropical system. Things can change. We want to still pay attention to this as we go throughout the weekend. We start to get a name system. We start to get more details on what this could mean for the eastern coast and for our area specifically. But overall, where we're sitting at 8 a.m. Saturday morning, things are looking pretty positive, and I am encouraged by what I have seen so far. So I'm going to turn to Facebook one more time to see if there's any questions. But if there's not, I am going to hop off of the stream for now, and we will pick this right back up where we left off coming up in about 30 minutes on 13 WMAZ. And then I'll be live again with the 11 a.m. update at 11 a.m. right here where we are right now. So I don't see any questions besides one about the Statesboro area. I think it's a pretty similar story to the central Georgia area. There may be some slightly increased showers for the Statesboro region just because it's a little bit closer towards the eastern coast, but similar to what I was saying just about the overall system, winds, really strong hurricane force winds, things like that are not necessarily as much of a worry with this system. You're going to notice a breeze. I'll say that. I think that's pretty much set in stone. You'll notice as we go Monday through maybe even Thursday or Friday next week, it's going to be breezy. I would recommend maybe wearing your hair up for the week or something like that because it will be breezy, but it's not necessarily a breeze that we're talking about taking down trees or anything like what we saw with Hurricane Helene. So that's where I think I see one last question about, is it going to hit land? That's kind of what I was trying to summarize here in my whole thing with, we don't exactly know if this is going to have direct landfalling impacts at the moment or if it's going to carry its way back out towards the Atlantic. Right now, again, the trend is that, oh my goodness. Okay, sorry. The trend is that this thing is heading towards steering back out into the Atlantic. So I would not really consider this at the moment to be trending towards direct land impacts. It's kind of going to curve past the coast like that and may hang out here for a little bit and dump a lot of rain in these regions. But it's not doing that thing that we saw yesterday where it was a direct inland impact. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, so with all of that information kind of laid out there and us being back here in just about 30 minutes on 13WZ, I'm going to go ahead and jump off. I will leave you with this cone here, and we will talk again. And if you want to join me for the latest update to see if things have changed at 11 a.m. this morning, I will be right back here live, kind of doing the same analysis that you just heard from me, but with the latest information. Potentially by 11 a.m., we could have a tropical depression. So we'll see. We'll touch base again at 11 a.m. Thank you so much for joining me for now.